think we can get started. Good evening slash afternoon to everyone. Uh, my name is Mark Calagos. My pronouns are he, him. I am one of the co-founders of PhilPro's Tayo project, your host for tonight. Along with, we also want to recognize the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans and Kappa for their generous support to underwrite this program. So yeah, welcome to Isang Bagsak with Black Lives, combating anti-Blackness in the Filipina XAO community, with some two incredible presenters today, Rohan Zhou-Lee and Tony DelaRosa. And then before we kind of get into it, just a little bit about the organization. You advance to the next slide, please. Not sure who's you know who's
Tony, I believe that's
who's
you.
gonna
Oh, sorry, my apologies, y'all.
oh yeah,
I'm not
can we
seeing.
just yeah
I'm not sure.
yeah
I'm not sure if you're seeing my advance for the next slide. Um, I am
oh
at
no
You're not seeing it. I just want to make sure tech wise.
okay yeah we're still on the title slide right now.
Okay. It looks like it froze. So that's a tech
Oh okay
issue.
okay
Let me go ahead and let me stop sharing and reshare again, y'all. Because it looks like it stopped. Sometimes when it does that, when we press record, after it's been shared. So let me do it again, y'all.
okay got
Um,
it.
cool. Can you see it?
Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, a little
Amazing.
bit of thank you, thanks, Tony. Um, a little bit about the Filipino Young Leaders program, or PhilPro for short. We are a network of high-performing next-generation leaders who advance the Philippines and the Filipino people through their advocacy and expertise in various industries. We continue to expand the pipeline of Filipino young leaders in the diaspora. By connecting them to the motherland, we foster collaborative multinational relationships that create innovations and support the socioeconomic progress of the global Filipino community. Next slide, please. And then Tayo is a project of PhilPro. It's an innovative data hub that empowers Philippine XAO communities by collecting data, fostering partnerships, publishing culturally relevant insights, and developing leaders to create an equitable and sustainable future. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Tayo's project director, my co-founder, Lizelle Tanglao.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. My pronouns are she, hers. Just a little bit more about Tayo, which is which this webinar is part of the organization that is hosting this. So we started out as a rapid response to COVID, and we've since expanded our work to many different topics that are important to our community. In particular, combating misinformation and disinformation, along with monitoring operations with a couple of other major projects, such as the Co-Insights project, as well as NCAPA, which is one of the supporters of this particular webinar. So with that, I hope you'll check us out. But I am going to hand it over to our educators tonight. If you want to go to the next slide, Tony DelaRosa and Rohan Zhou-Lee. Take it away.
Go ahead, Rohan.
Oh, me? Well,
Yes.
well, hello, everybody. Welcome so much. My name is Rohan Zhou-Lee. My English pronouns are they, them. I also respond to Sha, Ta, and AJ. Quick visual description for folks who need it. I am a brown-skinned Black Asian with Black curly hair. I'm also wearing a Black shirt, and behind me is a virtual background of a Black Asian solidarity LGBTQ pride protest. So yeah, Tony, you're up.
Thank you, Rohan. I'm Tony DelaRosa. I go by he, they, or she pronouns. I'm author of The Teaching the Invisible Race, my baby. And I would say most recently, I think like the biggest salient identity marker is like father right now. Two kids, Filipino Cuban kids. One just turned 11 months and one just turned 4, literally this last weekend, or yesterday actually. And it's been a joy, a lot of emotions, and if for those who are, need some disability access here, my image here is a red scarf, blue shirt, and brown Filipino smiling, I would say, is my imagery. And thanks for having us. We're excited to have this. And I met Rohan um, through just 2021, I believe, where I think everything's via Instagram these days. So really excited that we just kept this relationship going, kasama ship going. Since then, we had drinks in K Town in New York. And ever
A
since then, and sharing the woes of scholar activism, writing, doing all that work. And since then, we've just been working together since then. Yeah, anything you want to add, Rohan, before we go to the next slide?
Nope, just so grateful to be here, to be in community with everybody. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Cool. All right. The agenda for today is it's in 3 parts, so there's a lot. We're pretty ambitious today. There's 3 sections: intro to history and concepts, building off previous research, previous practitioner work, our previous work since we are scholar practitioners. Excuse me, a case study analysis of a few cases that we wanted to share so it's concrete, the things that we're thinking about and how we handle kind of the abstractness of how to combat anti-Blackness in the Filipino XO community, and then a kwentuhan with Rohan and I at the very end. So if you have questions, this is the moment. That part 3 is the moment where you can ask, and there's gonna be a break between part 2 and 3. Quick 5-minute stretch. And at the very end, a quick survey just to see how we did. If you want to learn more from us, cool. Let's jump right in. Boom. What is anti-Blackness? Zooming in. I'm passing it to Rohan. And you're on mute, Rohan.
And I am on mute. Wow, okay. Oh, okay. So a quick textbook definition of anti-Blackness is just like the beliefs, attitudes, actions, practices, and behaviors that minimalize and marginalize Black people in general. So like denying them their humanity. Yeah, and that can look in some ways that we'll get into in a bit more in deeper discussion. But that's just a general overview of what that is. So next slide. And here's a quick image showing a very general history of how anti-Blackness has manifested in the United States. It has looked like, starting from American chattel slavery, so the trafficking of Africans to the Americas, to the eras of segregation, Jim Crow, where still people of African descent do not have access or full access to basic human rights. And coming into today with mass incarceration, which, thanks to 13th Amendment, is still an echo of chattel slavery, where folks are being forced to do very, very cheap or free labor. And I definitely want to point out that while this chart is super important, I think in this discussion, it's also important to frame this from a lens of how does this apply to the Filipino or Filipino diaspora communities. And I would definitely think about how in the 18th century, the Spanish, when they colonized the Philippines, had also forced migrated Filipinos to the Caribbean to do what is called unfree labor. Filipinos were also impacted by segregation, other labor laws. And today, when we think about mass incarceration, there's also an ongoing crisis of the prison to deportation pipeline, where essentially a lot of folks of Asian descent or in the Asian diaspora are threatened with deportation after being incarcerated. You can look more into that through resources like the Asian Prison Support Committee. Next slide. And I'll pass it to Tony.
So white supremacy and anti-Blackness, right? We can't talk about anti-Blackness without white supremacy, right? As their foils. I like this quote by James Baldwin. The reason people think it's important to be white is that they think it's important not to be Black. And it builds upon this idea of not Blackness that people theorize on, Black folks have theorized on, and most recently, Claire Jean Kim has really brought this to the fore with her book Asian Americans in an Anti-Black World. As much as as much as Filipinos from research from across the U.S. sometimes don't claim Asian America, right? Racialization sees it differently. Racialization from the U.S. Census, at the very least, sees us as Asian Americans. So that's why I'm bringing this in. This quote: Asian Americans are constituted as at the disjuncture between white supremacy, a force that pushes all non-white groups down below white people, and anti-Blackness, an even more powerful force which elevates all not Black people above Black people. They are constructed concepts fluidly, dynamically, as not white people but above all, not Black. And what I like about this is that it really gives a framework and understanding, a theoretical framework to understanding the position where Filipinos could fit, right? I don't want to say they neatly fit between Asians and Blackness, because Claire Jean Kim was actually critiquing her old theory of racial triangulation, which is another, we could spend a whole nother webinar on that theory. But essentially on this chart, basically positioning white Asians closer to like in a stronger position in the medium level between Blackness and whiteness, was a mismapping of how to say this, more complex than that, right? I do like this though, this framework, because it's simple yet it does outline how white supremacy, even though it's pushing non-white groups down, Asian folks who arguably in this book say that, and Filipinos as well, arguably, who ascend and try to ascend for white supremacy, aim for white supremacy, and also, if you look at Du Boisian work, they aim for something different, right? My hand is going up. That's me hand raised on my screen. But really, what I'm trying to say is, Filipinos can also break this rule as well, but also neatly fit in, which is interesting. So where does this leave Filipina XO Americans? Passing it to Rohan.
Yeah, this is definitely a tough question, given our ancestry since before colonization. A lot of us would appear in, I guess, modern context, would present Black if we were to impose a more modern perspective on appearances. And so actually, what I do appreciate about you bringing up Claire Jean Kim, Tony, is that there are some things that I think we can extrapolate or pull from those theories. So like, I think right now, especially where we are within the Filipino community, it does feel like sometimes in order for us to, survive in the diaspora, we have to sometimes play towards white proximity or white adjacency, or appealing to certain white colonial gazes, which demands that we engage in anti-Blackness, which demands that we, in order to survive, place those who are darker skinned behind us or treat them worse than us. And I think this sort of engagement in anti-Blackness is a dismissal of our ancestry. To engage in anti-Blackness is to literally dismiss the ancestors that we come from as Filipinos,
Right.
who would literally be considered Black under the modern gaze. And that sort of anti-Black demands that we oversimplify our cultures, oversimplify our histories, oversimplify our relationships with empire, in order to appeal to these white imperial imaginations. And I think a lot about, especially in some scenarios, like a certain musical I might have written on, the idea of having a white person write our stories, right? When we engage in anti-Blackness,
Right.
we are actually giving white supremacy our stories. And that means we're giving up our identity. That's my thoughts.
That's great, and that's a lot.
It's a lot.
And going back to like Claire Jean Klim's like racial triangulation, I just wanted to just give more voice to it. It's like a triangular graph. I wish I showed it here. I wasn't going to go too deep into it, but um, on the y-axis is superior versus inferior, and then on the x-axis there's foreigner and insider, and then white folks are positioned at superior and insider. Asians are in the middle with superior, inferior, and then but closer to foreigner on the x-axis, and then black folks are insider, lower, and then inferior. Y-axis, inferior, x-axis, insider. But the issue with that, once I first saw that, it shows that Claire Jean Kim, past Claire Jean Kim, was assuming that black folks were insiders in general, and that they weren't being
Mhm.
mapped with a perpetual foreigner stereotype. That which is not the case, right? Because black folks are mapped that way. Also by contract, they're mapped that way, right? They don't get the
Right.
same contracts as Asian Americans who first moved here and got indentured servitude. That's an actual contract. Black folks were not given that. They were not seen as insiders at that time. So I just wanted to note that real quick. If you want to go deeper into it, just look up racial triangulation and then look up combating anti-blackness or like Asians in an anti-black world by Claire Jean Kim to see the comparisons between her developing theory. I think it's fascinating.
Mm.
Great, Rohan, go ahead and take this one away.
Oh, yes, of course. Give me 1 second. I was dropping into the chat. Actually, the link to the essay. Folks want
Oh
to read that.
yes, love it.
Or on page 4, there's the graph that Tony just described. You can look at it and kind of see the visual. So, Western colonization. Yes, so of course, pitching or just kicking off of that or jumping off that, springboarding off of that. A lot of anti-blackness, of course, and our aiming for proximity to whiteness, of course, we have to name it to change it, stems from colonization or classicism. In the context here, obviously, we are considering how Spanish colonization from the 16th century to the late 19th century imposed the ideas of whiteness as superior in the hierarchy. Or even considering after that, when the United States annexed the Philippines, and still these ideas of worshiping whiteness, worshiping white bodies, the colonial idea that basically the colonizer is assisting us, enlightening us
Right.
through these violent structures of education or miseducation, really. And I just want to point out, especially in the context of this conversation, both periods that are listed here did see specific moments of Afro-Filipino solidarity. So when we're thinking about the Spanish colonization and the Manila galleon trade, where they literally were trading Filipinos to do that unfree labor alongside Africans, I am not, from what I've been researching, it's not clear as whether or not it was the same form of trade, but either way, Filipinos and Africans were being forced into labor at the same time. In 1763, there was actually a rebellion on a Manila galleon ship, and Filipinos were able to self-emancipate and hide in modern-day New Orleans, where they were able to build community and build solidarity with the indigenous as well as self-emancipated Africans, such as Jean Saint Malo. And then in the United States, when they annexed the Philippines during the Philippine-American War, 1898, we saw a mass wave of Black soldiers who were initially used as human shields against the Spanish suddenly defecting and joining the Filipinos, such as David Fagan. Black journalists like Ida B. Wells, who co-founded the NAACP, also wrote in solidarity with Filipino communities. So once again, going back to our theme of how anti-Blackness is dismissing the ways of our ancestors and our elders.
Right. It occludes or omits any type of solidarity. That's the key point, right? Like
Right.
Anna Julie Cooper, the Black feminist writers of the whole group. But I feel like when I read about the Buffalo Soldiers in 1898, that time period, we often don't even hear Black women who are writing, who could not enlist at the time, right? 'Cause that's like a legal thing, right?
Right.
But they were doing that work already. They're like, what? No, we're not sending you out there. We're not. Why are we going out there? For survival purposes, they went out there, right? And then for survival purposes, they embedded themselves in the Filipino community. So I love the fact that you
Mhm.
added the enmeshing, the solidarity building there. And there's just so much untold stories. I feel like I hear a blip of David Fagan. I don't even
Yeah.
hear like what was happening. Like there's so many moments, and I only hear like a few angles right from that. I included some of this imagery here from White Man's Burden, just because when I was an educator, you'll always hear kind of an educational standpoint from me, since I was an instructional coach and educator for a long time. And when I was coaching, I saw these images taught by teachers, social studies teachers, right?
Mhm.
And they would glaze over who these people were. Um, they would show them, but then glaze. I remember a specific moment in Miami, Florida, a history teacher in high school, and I was like, this is world history. And you're just gonna glaze White Man's Burden, Rudyard Kipling, there's it's all Western imperialism, not just the US. The UK and the US were both racializing or mapping like a burdenous identity on Filipinos and other minoritized folks, right? So you see
Mhm.
Uncle Sam carrying Guamanians, right? Puerto Ricans, Hawaiians, and Filipinos. And I asked the teacher, I was like, who are those? Who are those people in the baskets? Native, and then he said native folks. I was like, no, 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 no. Aggregating them is not enough. That actually omits us. Let's go deeper. Let's go deeper, right? So I think it's important. I always share that story because it's so sticky, and that was in 2018, 2019, right? So just adding that, and it's also just a great article to look at. Little Brown Brothers Burden by Vina Orden, who kind of is writing a foil or like a response to White Man's Burden, the poem by Rudyard Kipling. So I would like to highlight that piece, that op-ed. Cool. We're jumping right into some of the concepts today. I'm going to pass it to Rohan to do the first two. And we were going to go over this video. We don't have time today, but I highly recommend going to One Down and checking out on YouTube the anti-blackness in Filipino culture. But go ahead and take away concept 1 and 2, Rohan.
Yeah, of course. So, oop, I'm not muted. Great. So, how do we see Filipino Exo Americans anti-blackness today? So, concepts we're going to dive into, especially in our case studies next. First one is definitely embracing this false concept of Black inferiority. Seeing Black people as servants, seeing us as less capable, less intellectually polished, or whatever. Um, Concept two that we'll also get into is Black exclusion. So thinking about regardless of our racial or heritage-based proximity to Filipino-ness, still excluding people of mixed race, or omitting or erasing Black and or darker skinned Filipino people from places of leadership. Tony, the last two.
Yep. Anti-black commentary, comments like "Don't stay out in the sun," and that's like such a typical one I hear in Filipino conversations. It's the one that probably most accessible if you grew up as a millennial, first first 1.5 second gen. You're hearing from tita or lola or lolo telling you this. Don't get nasunog. Don't get burnt from going outside, and that was always something hovering in my brain growing up, as someone who like has darker melanin in the Filipino family. My sister has like more fair skin, right? It would always get projected to me. And then concept for tokenizing blackness being for Black representation only, but not being supportive when the Black community faces harm, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And that is, we'll go deeper into some of these concepts, but like during the Black Lives Matter movement, not saying where were all the Filipinos, because there's definitely Filipino organizing for Black Lives Matter, but to what extent is a question I have. To what extent were they there? Who were
mhm.
they, right? Were they Black-Filipinxes? Were they what spatially were they, right? Were they on the coast? Were they inward, middle America, Midwest, right? I think about so many different aspects of what type of Filipino who were they, where were they, like, and how did they engage, how long did they engage, to go really deep into understanding tokenization, right? Because we see what we see today is like with zooming out to institutional tokenization, we see the withdrawal of resources from the Black community, right? Just broadly, right? We see Target withdrawing, like claiming that they would fund economic justice is kind of the language they use for Black folks and other racialized, racially minoritized communities, but then easily just draw out when it wasn't convenient for them. So for Filipinos, like, what was that for you? When we think about tokenizing Blackness, right? Cool. I think this is when we it wants to play. Dante Bosco wants to say something to y'all, but we'll share that for later, so you can see it in the resources later today. We're going to transition to case studies so we can get some into practice, some lived experience in this as well, and then unpack it through some reflection. Cool. So in this section, we'll go over a few case studies that we've experienced where anti-Blackness shows up explicitly, implicitly in our community. And then after reading the scenario, what we'll do is discuss it, right? We'll discuss the different approach. And not every approach has an easy answer. I don't have the answer. Rohan doesn't always have the answer, right? Rohan's not representing all Black folks, right? That's something that we were like talking about in our previous, when we were practicing. I was like, no, I'm not putting this on Rohan to represent all Black-Filipinx's, right? And it happens, right, Rohan? Like, it happens,
Too
like,
often.
you're the Black person, and then this in the room, it happens to any racialized minoritized folks in the classroom. I was always pointed to like represent the Philippines or Asians in the Midwest when I was the only Filipino, right? So like, it happens, right? But yes, it just to shed some light on how we're thinking about it. And I think that's important to like model that. One from a Black person, a Black-Filipinx, and a Filipino person, and one from someone who is non-Black, right? Non-Black Filipino, right? To see that and how we're thinking about it and what we're struggling with too. So we're jumping right in. I'm going to go through, I think, the first couple, and then Rohan will do the last two. And feel free to chime in. This is kind of the case study aspect, so feel free to chime in wherever you please. But this is recent, so we're going on the micro level here, the micro level, interpersonal level, and this whole webinar is focused on interpersonal. If we want to do one on systemic, it's hard to like take the systemic out of it because it's all interconnected. If we want to do one on this systemic one, we will do that in the future. But this one really is on the interpersonal level. And zooming into my family, this is actually a scenario that happened. I'm going to read it and then dive in. A distant Black Filipino member passed away in the last 7 years of my family. I grew up with this person's mother when I lived in California, growing up in Camp Pendleton. Their entire family attended my wedding. When in 2019, when my Black Filipino cousin passed away, another family member that I was organizing money for the funeral and mutual aid purposes said, "Why are we giving so much money?" I was taken back, like, viscerally over the phone. It was over the phone. They are not really our family, and we don't make a lot of money. So I see a few things here. How is anti-Blackness playing out here? What will you do to approach this? Right. I'll tell you exactly what happened. There's obviously multiple ways to approach the situation, but first thing was visceral. So I had a response. Luckily, I've worked in the Black community since probably more intentionally since 2012 in Indianapolis because I was a teacher there. So viscerally, I was like, well, first of all, their family to this other family member. And then another thing you could do is ask why, right? Why are you saying this? That's an easier way to go about it because you let the person just kind of divulge what they're saying, or they check themselves, right? That's always a good message. For me, I was a little triggered. So what happened to me was like, now that they're actually family, what I want to go back to do is actually ask them like, why was that the case? If I could go back and recourse. Anti-Blackness is clearly playing out because they're saying that they're not even part of the Filipino family tree that we're in. And if you know anything about Filipino Americans, right, the kapwa is real, the interconnectedness between Filipinos. You see another Filipino, we see each other similarly to family, right? Especially if you are in a place with not a lot of Filipinos, right? You kind of gravitate to each other. In this case scenario, both family members have known each other for a while, celebrated over the course of our lives. And then when we really needed it, they were questioning their Filipino-ness, right? As Rohan said earlier, that term Filipino-ness, by saying, why are we giving so much family? They're not really family, right? And what would you do to approach this and addressing it? Again, like I said, what I wish I would have done was ask a question first. I think that's not as invasive, not as direct. Sometimes the just direct is the best, of course. But for this relationship in particular, you have to think about the relationship that you're in the place and time, right? Because every battle needs to be strategized. Um, I wish I would have had that time and space, because I feel like it did create more distance between me and that family member after that, right? And I wanted to hold them in closer and allow them to come to the realization. I think the best educators allow for things to get corrected quickly in the moment, but also do it with this level of grace that I just didn't have, right? Right. So that's how I would handle it. Rohan, how did I do? I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna put it on you, Rohan, to judge me.
Well,
But
as the representative of all Black Filipinos in this space, just kidding. You know, I think you did more than I would have done.
again,
I am,
positionality is different.
I
Positionality is
know,
different, right? Like it's hard to
right?
really
My
say anything,
positionality is
right?
different. I with family, I tend to be more of the like, let them learn the hard way. I
Yeah,
tend to
I
be
mean, like
like,
that's
you
not a
know
bad
what?
thing. That's not a bad thing. That's not a
It's not a
bad thing
bad
for
thing.
positionality either. That's not a bad thing. I think I was like maintaining, for me maintaining for my position as like a non-Black Filipino, like maintaining in that relationship, since they're so close. I can't name this person, right? I'm just
Uh-oh.
trying to be careful, right? Trying to be careful because it's a family member. Trying to maintain that like that distance, like the trust early, and like try to hold on to them at the same time. Like it kind of shocked me, right? So I was like,
Yeah.
but I completely agree. Like learn the hard way is another learning experience.
It is
Like,
like they can see how the rest of the family was impacted by this person's passing, and they can be like, "Oh, I am feeling left out because this kapwa is suddenly being like compromised because of my anti-blackness." Um,
boom.
I'm also a fan of just throwing knowledge and history at people. I've done it to
Boom.
my mother many and many a times. Um, it is how she has come to understand. Well, a parallel is how she's come to really honor my queer trans journey or Firebird journey,
Yeah.
I guess at this point. But it's been a lot of just like, oh, here's information, here's an article, here's this, here's that. Like relationships with families are complicated and they're going to require complicated solutions sometimes, and that can be a very long-term solution.
Right. And this is I'm trying to like think about time, and like the time, like if you base relationships based on time, how long it's
Mhm.
been, right? And how long it's
Yeah,
gonna go, right? Because
yeah.
it's been a long journey with me and this person. And I would say they're doing better. Have we talked explicitly about this again? I wish we had. Do
When
I
you're
see them
ready,
doing better? Yeah,
whatever.
when they're ready. They're doing better. So yeah, thanks. That's case study number one. Looking at family at the interpersonal level, on a micro level. I'm going to go to the next one. I think this is schools. So this is moving into like professional space with youth, right? Another abstract situation in terms of how to navigate it, what to do, who I was the teacher of record at the time, right? And how am I maintaining power, right? Anti-Blackness in schools. You're a Filipino and teach at a school that serves a student demographic that is 50% white, all inclusive, 35% African American, 5% Filipina XO, and 10% that is Latina. During a lesson, one of your Black students says something that the entire class finds hilarious. One of your Filipino students affirms it by yelling out in laughter, my N word. You immediately respond by saying, you can't say that word as a non Black student. But before you can continue, the Black student says, no, it's okay. They're good. They're one of us, just with a different skin tone, right? How is anti-Blackness playing out here? What would your approach be in addressing it, right? Just think about that. So what would I want to do? No, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I like what I did. Was it perfect? No. In this scenario, pause the classroom. I think like a good facilitator move if you're in that position, right? And perhaps this could mirror at the adult level, in a program space, right?
Mhm.
It could. Maybe it could organizing space in a corporate space. But this was with the youth in this class, with the relationship I had with the youth, I paused the space as the teacher of record and said that you can't say the word as a non-black student, right? And they had why? That's the question of the year, right? Why is the case? I said, well, let me think. Let me pause and do this Spider-Man moment so I can give you an appropriate response that's also not complete, but also that leads into more questioning and more learning later on. Because it wasn't resolved in that moment, but I would say that the students were like, okay, Mr. D, okay, Mr. D. Okay, I trust you. You're good. You're good. So I said, well, let's talk about the history of power. So I did what Rohan said earlier around giving a little bit of history, but this is midway through class, midway through another complete different lesson, right? So I'm not stopping the entire day to teach the history and embark on History
Mhm.
101 of anti-Blackness in the Filipino community. I'm not doing that in the class just because I didn't have the time. But for a placeholder for like at least 5 to 10 minutes, we talked about, hey, what is power? What is your relationship to power there? And that's hard to do with middle school students, right? How do you do that and describe power if I didn't explicitly say teach about power in that space before this actually came up, right? So explaining you don't have any relationship to power in relation to that word. So here's the outcome. Here's what could happen if you were out there in a public space and this happened, and a group of people that wasn't a safe community was watching you. They overheard something and they have trauma related to that word, right?
Mhm.
What might happen to you in that moment? I can't control that. This class can't control it, right? But I can share with you that hypothetical, right? That could happen because that could happen, right? And then when I shared the hypothetical, the student was like, okay, cool. Okay, sir, Mr. D, let's talk about it. And I also followed up with them to teach a little bit more because this does involve direct instruction. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, Mr. D just being Mr. D again, talking about race all the time. We break the rules of race, right? Is what like the kids are thinking in their brain implicitly, right? Mr. D,
Mhm.
these adults are overcomplicate things, right? But prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, right? They're not fully, mindful of what's happening outside the classroom all the time, right? So that's something I wanted to add as well when I shared this with them. Cool. Cool.
Yeah,
Anything you want to add, Rohan?
yeah. I definitely you definitely nailed it in a way that I think I would have responded as well. Because for me, this is also about who has permission and access to certain trauma spaces.
Yeah,
So like obviously that word has a very, very dark and unhappy history. And obviously his black friend or their black friend, I don't know their pronouns, gave them permission, uh, which gives them access to that specific space, but that permission is not universal. So, you know, so for me, it's like the anti-blackness is showing up in a very like gray area kind of way because it is, I think between those friends that's their business. I personally disagree.
right,
My
right,
non-black friends could never say that word around me. We would not be friends anymore. um but
right.
it does, I don't think that the student meant it, but it does trivialize the trauma of other black people who are navigating the trauma of that word differently than their friend. Yeah. Also, can we just like uplift this comment in the chat that I'm loving on by, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, but Nike. Um, yeah. Um,
Yeah. Go ahead and read it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They said as a Pinay that attended an HBCU, with that noise
Hey.
involved, I always found it interesting how even Blackness had no convenient and easy definition. It was very interesting to understand the Filipino place in Blackness and how Blackness is still ever evolving based on how Black folks decide to define it in that generation. Hmm. The system shifts too as folks being dissected, um, Oh, as folks begin dissecting their own identity in the system. Blood quantum is also an interesting issue when discussing race and segregation. 1000%. The number of times I have had to really dive into that as a mixed race person, amount of times I have been barred from access to Black spaces because of my Asian
Mm.
identity.
I was just reading that. I was just reading your article actually today.
Oh, really?
Yes, about that experience. So keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that soonish, but yeah,
Right.
that I think about a lot, how identity is always evolving and how we are redefining ourselves within empire as a way to seek power, but also we are at risk of compromising our own cultivation of that power as we are not only forming new identities, but to borrow from Palestinian author Edward Said's idea of otherness. You know, when we are constructing identity, we are also constructing the other, sometimes not realizing it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Can we
Ooh. Yeah.
um
Yeah. We're gonna go deeper. We're gonna go deeper.
let's do that during Kwentuhan and the question that
Kwentuhan.
Michi put in. We'll put that in Kwentuhan. That's okay with folks.
Yeah.
We gotta
Yeah.
get through this.
Yeah. Yeah. We got
Tony.
two more case studies, and then we have a quick break.
Yeah.
Passing it to Rohan. Yep.
Okay. So speaking of my trauma, it's a trauma llama drama dump.
Oh man.
So another case study 3, using Black people as servants. The community is producing a music event to celebrate Filipino American History Month. A Black Filipinos led the marketing, on the ground support, and was offered a cut of sales, but they never get paid. How is anti-Blackness playing out here? Well, for me, the obvious bit was expecting free labor from Black people. Also, the unspoken demand that the Black Filipino proves their Filipino-ness by doing all this work, and of course, being exploited for it. Yeah, how I approached it. Well, it's business in the arts, so of course I broke off ties with these people. Um, some folks in that circle did approach me again about doing a project, which I am open to, but of course, so I should backtrack a little bit. What also kind of got me about this was how Kapwa was exploited. You know, the idea of we're doing this for
Yeah.
community, you're doing all this for community, and yet everyone but the Black Filipino person gets paid. So of course, my relationship with Kapwa is now compromised, and has been ever since. A little bit trauma. Um, but definitely, yeah, I think for me, it's been like, okay, this is a learning lesson. Um, Folks can fling around terminology like Kapwa in our community, but are you actually practicing Kapwa in our community? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, gatekeeping kapwa,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whoever holds and defines it is the one. And you're right. Um, it can do the same thing what you're saying about Edward Said. I always think of what actions or inactions can racialize you and like
Yeah.
uh, erase you from space, and then like from there, really start defining the type of relationship we're gonna have, right? And how penetrable is kapwa, how defined it is, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
people assume kapwa, and that's a danger
Yeah.
within any organizing space, is assuming kapwa, right? And like any concept needs to get broken down, and any concept that moves places has different contextualization, right? And where it comes
Mm.
from has a different definition. I just feel like, whew, yeah, the
You-
exploitation of Kapwa could be its own book. It's its own thing. Oh
Is
my,
that your next book,
exploitation of
Tony?
Kapwa. Oh my
Are
goodness.
we co-writing this book?
Oh my goodness. Well, Kapwa, like I've been diving deep into Kapwa because I'm really a study on Filipino well-being,
Yeah.
Filipina EXO well-being and global politics. Um, and Kapwa has been dropped here and there. You know, it's been used. We're
Mm.
using it and diving deeper into the theory. It's from psychology, from Enrique Virgilio, right, and a psychologist. I've seen Carl Cervantes, a psychologist from Diwa, use it on IG, a great public scholar, and others who like looked at the lit review of Kapwa. And one thing is clear in the lit review is that Kapwa is even just under
Yeah.
theorized, and then also like empirically untheorized. So that means that people are just kind of just. I mean, here's the tension I have. Theories of the flesh is a theory that's an embodied theory. Cool, that's an embodied theory. We have embodied knowledge. Amazing. I love that. And to understand the couple as an embodied thing, I think I love that. At the same rate, if you're using it and throwing it around, that's the issue that I have, right? Because, like you said, it leads to exploitation because couple holds power, right? Holds a certain type of power when you're using it, especially when it's something that people gravitate towards. I'll just leave it at
Right.
that. People gravitate towards a couple, especially Filipinx diaspora, Filipinx diaspora. They're like, ooh, interconnectedness. I love that. But to what extent? Who's interconnected and who's not? Who's
Right.
insider and who's outsider? You know what I mean?
Right.
Apparently, we can map it onto racial triangulation as well. So in some form. But that's another story. I'm gonna pass it on because we have one more case study, and then we'll take a break, and
Yeah.
then we'll get into Kwentuhan.
Yeah. Okay. Last case study. Tokenizing and excluding of Black folks during Stop Asian Hate events. So of course, most of us, I think everyone was aware of 2020. If not, okay, cool. The film community is organizing a Stop Asian Hate rally after a hate crime occurs. The survivor is a woman, and the perpetrator is a Black man. A Black-Filipinx person comes on board to do marketing. Black-Filipinx are barred from speaking at the rally. Organizers said that they wanted to, quote, aim for what is feasible. Once again, anti-Blackness is coming up as a very obvious exclusion. Exploitation of Kapwa, once again. Yeah. How did I approach this? Well, as a as a journalist, I wrote an article about it. Oh, they have. Oh, they,
As you should, as you should. That's fine. As you should. You are directly harmed. Okay.
I was. So I was like, you know what? Because the thing that I did not write about in this situation was that a lot of the folks who were like organizers in the space I met during the BLM 2020 surge and were very supportive of my work with Black Asian Solidarity organizing, particularly the Blasian March. These were the first people to completely abandon me during this scenario. Some of these folks brought me on, but then when I asked for help in the accountability process, they basically all ghosted. So again, the idea of where is Kapwa? What is Kapwa in this scenario? Does it even mean anything when you bring people who are more marginalized than you to do all this free labor, and then when they require an accountability process, leave them alone? So yeah, I'll drop the article in the chat because that's who I am. I am a
Yeah.
Leo, but I think the ultimate goal of the article I wrote was really to remind the community that inclusion is revolution. Inclusivity is a revolutionary act. And the more we are flexible and fluid with our ideas of community, so long as we are all bound to the same ideas of collective liberation, I think is the learning lesson here for a lot of people.
Ooh. This one in particular got me because as an ally, I'm trying to think about what I could have done because I don't know this knowledge, unless you would have told me or if I would have saw as an observer, right? Which is to say, check on your Black folks in the space when they're organizing, if they're there, if they're being included or not included in this space. Because Stop Asian Hate, there's Asian. Asian folks are Black folks, right? And vice versa, right? And if they're there, like in New York, which is hella diverse, you're gonna have multi-ethnic ethno-racial identities. Yo, I wish I was there, Rohan, so I could be like, yo,
It's
checking
okay.
in, checking in on the organizing, checking on the marketing. I always That's a good question to have. I have some synthesis questions that kind of like speak directly to this at the very end. But yeah,
Yeah.
And to know the survivor is a woman, perpetrator is a Black man. Yeah, so in this case scenario, you're saying that the perpetrator for this case scenario was a Black person.
It was, and it
Got
was
it.
a very high profile case in local news. So that was
Got it.
also why it made it very tense. I think one of the biggest mistakes of our political movements in that time period was that we were not slowing down to educate each other on our struggles. So, you
Yeah.
know, like the mainstream media played a lot of, or promoted a lot of anti-Asian moments where the perpetrator was Black, right? This then further emphasized the anti-Blackness, emphasized the idea that Black people are dangerous, are criminal, barbaric, savage. Um, and so therefore approximate to whiteness and white solutions of safety is the solution for the Asian community. But of course, these stories ignore the fact that according to the Virulent Hate Project at University of Michigan, 89.6% of anti-Asian violence in 2020 came from white people. Less than 10% came from Black people. So it's
Boom. Yep.
right. So I think a lot of us were organizing on the basis of mythologies, which
Right.
we have alluded to earlier on. These mythologies of white intellectual superiority, the idea of white worship, which goes hand in hand with white saviorship. And
Right.
then that transcends and transforms, transmutates into these modes of anti-Blackness within our community.
Yeah. Amici Trota is asking if you can link that report. If you have that link to the report, Rohan, I'm not sure if
Oh,
you
yeah.
do. I'm gonna also share, from personal experience, from being the person who did the harm, because this happened in 2020 when South Asian hate was rising up. Black Lives Matters was really strong, right? Happening because of George Floyd, right? And the quote unquote racial reckoning that was happening. Um, yeah, like Filipino folks. I was modeling an event after that long Bagsak, after the West Coast kind of like a structure of like cross-racial solidarity with Black lives, Isang Bagsak. My now um, committee member on my dissertation proposal is Alison Tintian Cubales, who is the chair of this group. So I was learning from them. I went to their session, and then I was like, you know what? I want to do that same type of session in the Midwest or nationally, contextualizing education in particular. So I curated it with another Filipino person, right? Where were the Black folks in 20? This was in 2020. Yeah, I believe 2020, called Isang Bagsak as verb. Um, and as soon as we posted it, it was me and another person. I won't say the name, I don't have the consent to say them, but me and this other Filipino leader, we posted it, the graphic of it. It was us co-leading it. And then as soon as we posted it on LinkedIn, a Black woman kindly gave us feedback. Was like, this is um patrimonial at best, I guess was the word, patriarchal at best, something to that extent, that effect, where Black folks were included in the actual marketing, in the actual organizing, in the actual session when we were teaching the community about combating anti-Blackness in the Filipino community, with the Filipino community, right? Just a learning to share, not the same exact situation, but just a learning, right? Because I often still see this happen, right? And it's not to say, this is not to say that non-Black folks cannot teach about um, and combating anti-Blackness. That's a neoliberal logic, meaning that this is all only falling upon Black folks to teach how to combat anti-Blackness. No, that's completely false, right? One, it's unrealistic, right? When the actual labor, the issue is
Right.
actually being created by white supremacy, upheld by non-Black um, folks, right? Sometimes perpetuated by agents of white supremacy who happen to be Black, but mostly by non-Black folks, right? So that's something that I learned, but in that space when things were like trending, right? I
Mhm,
think that was
mhm,
the
mhm.
issue with that person, right? And we were jumping on board, trying to showcase our knowledge and stuff like that. And I think that was the main issue of that, right? And the lack thereof of the Black community. But soon correction. The correction was soon correction. Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate it, and we're gonna do better. That's it, and we do better. You know what I mean? We do
Mhm.
better. We get people paid, and we move forward. You know what I'm saying? As we do this work, because people get paid for their labor, right? Um, y'all, that was our fourth case study today. We could have went through so many other case studies, so many other, but we went really
Whole
quickly
other session.
through, yeah, so many case studies. We're gonna give a quick 5 minute break. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, 5 minute stretch break before we get into Kwentuhan, where I'll ask like a question, one or two, or just one, and then we can dive into your questions with me and Rohan. Cool. So take a let's get back at um 5 minutes. So on my lens from Central Time, it's seven. Let's just round it out. 7:05. Let's do that. 7:05, 8:05. We'll come back. So you can do bio break, stretch break, because we just gave you a lot of input and case studies to apply. Think about that, marinate on those, and then bring them back in our conversation. Cool. We'll see you at right after the 5 mark. Coming back in about 2 more minutes, y'all. 2 more minutes. All right. It is 7:05 on the Central Time Zone, 8:05 on the East Coast. We're gonna get started with part three with Kwentuhan, talk story and Q&A with me and Rohan. And I see some questions already in the chat. This is a moment where I'll collapse actually the share screen so we can see each other. If you feel comfortable putting your camera on through this next portion, and then from there we will have some conversation. Cool. And I have one question, Ron, just to start us off. But let me stop sharing and collapse imagery. Um, yeah, so first question, and then I'll just put it out to the audience, and the audience I don't know if they can voice their question out loud. If not, we will read them out. But I wanted to start on strong examples. I think you talked about solidarity in previous examples, Rohan, where we talked about the 1898 David Fagan, we talk about the Black feminist movement and past experiences. What else? What other like
Oof.
strong examples of pro-Blackness in the Filipinx community have you seen that was like, oh, this is a good model, follow it?
Oh, a good model.
From an organizational standpoint, if you can
Yeah.
like, yeah.
So I guess for me, what's I've been appreciating about a lot of folks is definitely identifying folks who exist between the margins or exist between the boundaries of race. Like just celebrating mixed race people, I think is a good way to start as an entry point. So I want to uplift the work of Fire Chicago. Last year we
Ooh.
collaborated and did this amazing event called the Great Baklan, and it was a gathering to celebrate queer, trans, Filipina community in the Chicagoland area. It was the first Filipino LGBT Pride event ever in Chicago. Yes, a fire.
A fire.
um,
That's what I keep hearing. I keep hearing about a fire. Like, I want
yeah.
to meet them. I want to meet that group.
Oh,
Because they
I
seem
got you.
dope.
I got you.
They're down. They're like 2 hours down. I need to go visit them.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, so I love that this program was how they really were like able to not just include, they were able to include multiple people of mixed race identity, and it was a way that it was not tokenizing because it was like multiple Black Asians or other people who are really trying to like more explicitly dive into their indigeneity and use that indigeneity in their performance arts. That I've always super loved. Um, because like I think one of the other struggles with anti-Blackness or like how to I Monica, hi.
What's
There,
up?
there are some of Fire folks who are on this call right now, so like shout out to y'all. Um, I think what where was I with this? I feel like for me, what I really have found kind of frustrating with a lot of Black Asian solidarity events is that there are no, like you'll have a panel or whatever, and there's always like a Black person, Asian person. There's never like a mixed race Black Asian person. And to
Yeah.
me, that's always a questionable presentation because I'm like, well, then what narrative are you trying to showcase? Is this a narrative about how we are separate? Because I feel like whenever we are ignoring mixed race people in these cross-racial conversations, we're basing our organizing on the mythology that we can't coexist or that we have not actually been able to create community together. Um, yeah, so yeah, shout out to Fire.
Yeah. 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 I've seen that too, like in just Black Asian, like that language framing in and of itself.
Yeah,
Like just even that in and of itself in different events, different programs, research labs that kind of been created in the post 2020, right? Around Black Asian unity, Black Asian souls unite, things like to that end. And yeah, like just the omission of Black Asians or Blasian folks or Black-Filipinxes or any in general, like they're it's like as if the titles could not encapsulate your magic. You know what I mean?
right, right.
Yes, 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 and we need to do better, right?
Right, right. Like it makes me think about there's this podcaster, her name is Charmaine Fury. She's Afro-Japanese and she talks a lot about this term that she uses called monoracial privilege and
Oh
how
yeah.
like folks who are not mixed race are able to use narratives that are already built into society to like, further their cause or whatever, but it's always at the cost of mixed race people. So
Yeah.
like yeah, it's like having a Black Asian solidarity event with no mixed race people lets me know that your event is still on the basis of white narratives of our community and how we interact, you know?
Perpetuates the very things that we're trying to combat too, which is
Yeah,
it's inconsistent. It's like we
yeah.
could have went there. My question was going to be like, what in a moment of anti-blackness where you've witnessed organizing gone wrong but could have been corrected easily? I think we just answered that a little
We
bit
did.
there. You know what I mean? We could have just like you could have just tweaked it a little bit and would have shifted
Hmm.
a lot of things and would have shifted even the recruitment, the design, the questions you're asking, who's
Right,
there, how we
right,
think about it.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna stop now because it's 7-Eleven. I want to put it out to the community because I have more questions, obviously, if there's no questions, but I saw a couple already that could take us all the way.
Yeah.
I want at least 5 minutes for the closure, but yeah, let's look at some of the questions. Can anyone voice it? I'm not sure if we can voice it, voice their question.
I did see Michi. I'm sorry I'm mispronouncing your name. I saw that question in the chat. Um, I think oh, okay, Michi, if you can come off and just ask a question, I guess we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm not having video on because it has been a day. So,
In a day.
We know it.
No, man.
really quick, thank you both for really, really great discussion. There's a lot in here, yeah, that you were talking about that is relevant to some of the work that I'm doing as well. So I really appreciate it. And a lot of that work is focused in particular looking at media narratives. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on the role of exported media and culture, which are arguably two of the biggest and most influential exports the US has. I mean,
Yeah,
globally, but in
yeah.
particular because of the, quote unquote, special relationship that the US has with the Philippines, like the role of that media in spreading and reinforcing anti-blackness in a way where it's already there and people are already indoctrinated in it before they've ever left the Philippines, right?
Mm,
even when you're in the diaspora, you come here and you are able to have these discussions and broaden your understanding. Those narratives are still being perpetuated and absorbed with family and communities in the Philippines. So I'm wondering about your thoughts on how much of an impact that has, and if there are opportunities that we have to use that shared language of pop culture to broach and maybe approach these discussions about what anti-Blackness looks like, how it works, how we can learn to recognize it through a medium that sort of like removes a bit of that immediate defensive sense. Because if you're talking about how it's reflected in media versus how it's reflected in someone's individual actions, right? Like I've used comic books and movies and novels as a way to broach the topic of race and identity in ways that have made it less overwhelming, and also in a way that's more relatable, for particularly for folks who haven't thought that much about how these things transmit these messages.
Yeah. Okay. So as a novelist, I am loving all that you're doing and saying. As a journalist, loving all you're doing and saying. Your question reminded me actually an article I'm working on regarding police brutality towards Asian Americans. And I was able to interview the family of Angelo Quinto. Folks who do not know, he was an individual who was experiencing a mental health crisis during December 2020, if I remember correctly. And the family called 911. Police entered the house. They put a knee on his neck, just like George Floyd, and Quinto also passed away during this incident. And I am wondering if there's a way to uplift the stories of the Filipinos in diaspora, especially those who have migrated from the Philippines to here. Because when I spoke with the mother, she was talking about how we think about police corruption as something normal in the Philippines. We don't think about police corruption or police violence something here because of the media being exported by the United States. Like she came here thinking, oh, police in the Philippines are bad, but police in the States are good. Police are safe because of all this, propaganda that's being exported to the Philippines. And so, of course, her lived experience contradicted that part. So I definitely think finding those stories, in particular the ones I would think from Filipino immigrants that actually directly contradict those, media false narratives around our relationships to power, for example, our relationship to policing. When we're thinking about how in 2020 we were all taught, well, policing is, good for the Asian community, bad for the community, Black community. What does safety mean then? When in fact, policing is unsafe as it is for all of our communities. So yeah, I think uplifting stories, because I mean, as an artist, I think storytelling is just so impactful. So yeah, I think uplifting the stories of people whose experiences contradict the mainstream narratives, I think could be really helpful here.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, about the impact of narrative, particularly since I work heavily in speculative spaces. So thinking about the idea of Filipino futurisms, and there's a author, Tochi Onyebuchi, who has written about
Yes,
how
I'm a fan.
in his work about how he is imagining a world where public safety does not rely on the police state, and what it means to use that imaginative power to propose alternatives that for whatever reason not everybody thinks of for themselves, because we have all these very strong, deeply entrenched narratives. Like I feel like Law and Order will be here till the heat death of the universe. But yeah, I think that actually touches a bit on the other question that I had about things about ways to talk about uh, creating public safety in our communities without
Mm,
relying on the criminal legal system and
mm,
the risks of perpetuating the more virulent harms of anti-Blackness um, that come with relying on the police state. Because um, after that horrific event in Canada at the Filipino festival there
mhm,
I've seen discussions flying around about, we want to make sure that our spaces are safe. We are still operating under there's anti-Asian violence has not gone away. And with the increase in xenophobic rhetoric from the current administration, we all know how quickly that can pick up again. So having those discussions about how to keep our community safe spaces safe without making them unsafe for other communities, for Black folks, for Black Filipinos, and also for ourselves. But what are the ways that we can have those discussions about safety does not have to require a police presence?
I have thoughts, but I want to leave space for Tony to say something because
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm like the icky. I mean, not icky. I mean, maybe it's icky, but
All icky and
the
sticky.
it's so icky and sticky. Yeah. I'm thinking about like I'm thinking about Canada. I'm thinking now that you bring that up. I'm thinking about the different infrastructure that they have, the different kind of politic that they have, or when I say politic, the dynamic and like viewpoint that they have on policing. They have anti-racist like committees on police task force, right? And I'm not saying that's not existing in the US, but they welcome that in places in Canada. So which is telling me like they're like reformist, so reformist, and they're okay with that. Like I would say relative to like in the US, Madison has like these like police that are like nice cops. They have this idea of what a nice cop is here. That they openly the city trains itself on anti-racism, right? Like so if they accept that, so if they're accepting that and they're like really willing to work with that, to me just makes it think it like when we're like pushing for abolition and futurism without cops and defunding and divesting, that is two separate
Oh yeah,
it is that completely two separate things, which is to
and art
say the
here.
organizing and the educating, yes, has to be there obviously, but the organizing as we're seeing today, with Palestine,
Yeah.
the coastal state here, um the organizing has to be aligned. Our leaders need to be aligned with that solution base. Because I'm thinking also about the Stop Asian Hate movement, right now more broadly, instead
Hmm.
of just the Filipino community and the research. The
Hmm.
top four solutions for Stop Asian Hate, according to Stop AAPI Hate Report Card, they did like a big community survey nationally. And the third largest solution generated by the public was more law enforcement, which
Ugh.
is which is not, and this is on the 2022 hate report card, which aligns with what people like in the public, the people like normally feel is appropriate because they can't see futurism, right? I think you're right. I think we should get the futurism with the exposure to it, to Filipino futuristic speculative work. It just needs to make it a wave that's bigger than it is right now. Because I've seen it. Maybe I've seen you post it, Michi. I don't know if I've seen you online because that Japanese author, I believe I've seen recently where, but I'm not seeing enough of it, right? Like, and to what extent are they going to hit the algorithm to hit the masses, right? Because I want that to be a language that people get. But if I bring up abolition, if I bring up futurism, it just goes over so many people's heads. And that's not what I want as someone who does policy to practice work in the community. I want things to be accessible. So how do we meet people where they're at while also pushing them is like the big question I have, which I don't have the answer yet. outside of more exposure. We need to take a hold of algorithms. We need to get a hold of, as much as AI is bad, because like I think I always think about the speed at which solidarity is being torn apart, and the speed of which it's being broken because of AI being introduced into the fore, into the world right now.
Or
And for I know many of us in our bodies are like, oh my God, solidarity is being broken a lot, to some extent. And then also, like, we see like the movement for a free Palestine. Like, obviously we see globally on the ground, people are like, nah, this doesn't go well, right? So I don't know, that's just my thoughts on it. I just basically describe how hard it is. I want more futuristic work to hit the masses. What is that What is that method? So I'm gonna pause there. Let's leave like 3 minutes for a closer, and like allow Rohan to respond.
Okay. I wonder if we can also weave in Tree's question if possible, but
Let's
my
do quick hits. Let's see if we can do quick hits if we can.
okay. My quick response to all of that is one, we need to figure out how to navigate gatekeeping in publishing and media. Two, I dropped it in the chat, but one thing that can definitely be amplified or woven into storytelling is Mia Mingus's pod mapping. She's a disability justice organizer and created this whole method of community-based safety, which you can look at by clicking on the video that I dropped in the chat. Also, I think in terms of like Filipino futurism or any other futurism, as actually a speculative writer myself, I definitely want to remind people that, policing did not start at the beginning of time. So obviously our communities had ways of safety like babaylans or any other community safety structure. I think leaning into that and bringing that forward might be interesting, especially since we know how gatekeeping and publishing loves like the exotic Asian space. So as gross as that is, it can be used to your advantage. Okay, so let's see. There's one more question. Make a rapid fire response, Tony, and then we'll wrap up. Is that okay?
Sure. Is this
Okay.
Teresa's question?
Yeah.
Okay.
What can I, as an East Asian, China American, do to help raise awareness of mixed race issues? Is there something that you wish non-mixed Asians better understood about mixed race issues? Everything. I'm just kidding.
So many things.
So many things. I think honestly, again, as a storyteller, just finding and amplifying mixed race stories, and bringing it into the community, especially the stories that will like question our assumptions about what is the other, and actually through those stories finding out what is similar between all of us.
Yeah, I like in the book Teaching the Invisible Race, like I want educators. Rohana is in it. Rohana is in it.
A
Is a There's a chapter where like I want educators to have like living leaders, Asian American leaders in the classroom, so people can see where those Asian American leaders outside of the large Grace Lee Boggs, Larry Itliong, Yuri Kochiyama, rightfully so they should be there too. Awesome. And present day leaders like Rohan, who is leading a movement on the
me.
ground, yeah, Rohan, who's leading a move on the ground, um, a global movement, right, for a queer, trans, non-binary space, inclusive of, that is what people would say outside of it. It's like so niche. It's so neat. Yeah, that's how beautiful it is, and that's how realistic it can be because it's a niche. It's what we're erasing. You know what I mean? And people come to it, right? Whenever I have to educate people on it, they're like, "Never knew this existed." I'm like, "Y'all need to find stuff." Like Rohan was saying, like find it, center it. And there's a concept of like multi-partiality. What better multi-partiality is just from psychology, which is like to hold multiple perspectives, but centering the most quote unquote marginalized identities in any given program, space, social justice conversation, education space, right? That's kind of like how it's being defined by psychologists. And what better than to uplift multi-ethnic, multi-ethno racial perspectives, because they're how neoliberal logics operate in social justice spaces, education spaces, API Heritage Month, right? We'll get the monoracial privileged folks, right, first, right? Because those are the narratives that are just populated on AI quickly. Because people quickly, one, they go to us last minute. They go to our narratives last minute. So when they look in, they type in and they don't even go down to look like who are the same folks that are getting highlighted each time. Because again, we're seeing the same folks getting highlighted in past leaders and in present leaders, right? Regarding the Stop Asian Hate movement in particular, right? We're seeing the same folks, right, highlighted. So this is to say, like, slow down. We can all slow down. We all can think a little bit deeper. And I think AI has us thinking so quickly that it's not, it's eliminating critical thinking and critical living, critical embodiment, which is to slow down. Y'all,
It's
it's at
also,
7.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say AI is also expectations of the global south, meaning we are expecting our own
Yes.
people. Also, they are trained to program things to fit white definitions of everything. So like,
Right.
boom. Okay, I'm
Right.
done.
It's not adequate. It's by no means. And it's actually horrible to the, like you said, to the environment, right? How much water it uses. 7:29. Not everything, but it was something today. I'm gonna reshare screen so you can see the last bit of the presentation. Can you see, Rohan, the screen?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Okay. Synthesis quickly, and then we're gonna hand it back off. We learned how to identify and define anti-blackness at the interpersonal level. Practice how to approach anti-blackness in a generative way, and then learn from a Black-Filipinx leader, Rohan Zhou-Lee. Questions to think about is like, is the Black community a Black person or Black history or culture being referenced where you're at? If yes, how is Blackness or Black people being portrayed? Positively, negatively, both? If both, how does one approach addressing the negative, harmful aspects when there's a positive happening there, right?
Mhm.
When there's a positive and a negative, it's like, oh, but at least there's this, like, but you should address everything, right? Any anti-Blackness that comes up. And then last is the Black community or Black people directly involved in events that are directly designed to serve them. Is like some thinking and processing um, and ways to move forward. And then some resources that we will share post event. We won't go through all of them, but some lists that we draw from, some of our own resources, some folks from the community, some from like, Ate Allison, who's been really pivotal in this work on the West Coast. And then I'm going to pass it back to the organizers, the Tayo Help organizers, to just say a couple words before we come off. Please out.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tony, Ron. This has been a lot of information, but really important conversation to have. So want to just, I dropped this into the chat. We have a couple of resources here as well on tayohelp.com. And then if you could also leave us some feedback, I think it's the next slide, possibly, feedback
Yes.
on this webinar. Feedback is a gift. So anything, what did you like about it? Anything else you want to see, please fill out that form. That helps all of us. And I think that's it. I could hand it back to you guys. I think that's it on our end.
Yeah. I'm selfishly just promoting because I'm leading a study on Filipino politics and well-being. If you're interested in it, it's called Usap Tayo. And I would love to interview you if you're interested and can you get paid for the study, and then it helps at least, especially if you're in the Midwest. Looking at my fire folks in here, they're still here. Because it's overwhelmingly like New York, California, who's reporting in, and I definitely want to get as many spatial regions as possible in the study. So reach out if that's you. You can message me at TonyRosaSpeaks at gmail.com, or just find me on Instagram at TonyRosaSpeaks, and then we can talk from there. Rohan, any last words from you?
Nothing but gratitude, Tony, as always. Thank you for bringing me on. Thank you to Tayo. Thank you to everyone
Thank you,
here.
Tayo.
Yay. I'm just dropping in my, that is, let's jump in with the meeting. I'll send me a few links. So yeah, thank you for my website. Lizelle. I'm also dropping in the chat our upcoming event, which is Blasian Pride,
Ooh.
which is our annual celebration of LGBT, Black, Asian, and Blasian people. If you're in New York City, come on through. It's June 7th at 2 p.m. At Cabin Plaza, which, as I learned, was historically the first Filipino neighborhood in Brooklyn.
Bagsak?
Until
Okay.
yeah, then it got torn down for a highway. I was like, oh, of course,
Hell no.
of course it was. Um, yeah, um, yeah, that's
Okay.
all.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you. Have a good night. I hope you got something from it, and continue the work. And we hope to see you in person. If you do see us in person, don't be shy. Say hi to us, and we'd love to connect. Cool. Bye, y'all.
Yeah,
Thanks. Peace, peace. Bye.
thank you all.